Welcome to the Mount Pleasant podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
This is the Mount Pleasant podcast. I'm your host, Brian Cleary, and all thanks to the great people of Mount Pleasant Magazine, I get the honor, the privilege of introducing you to Mount Pleasant, the people who make it such a special place to do business, to work, and even to live. We're introducing you to Mount Pleasant's best on the Mount Pleasant podcast. When a conversation comes up about retirement, you're usually looking at someone older, not like me though, but somebody moving to Florida, something like that. There's a little different talk about retirement today here on the Mount Pleasant podcast. I'm Brian Cleary, and low country tennis legend Shelby Rogers joins us. Shelby, you're 31 years old. Actually, for someone who's a professional athlete, that is retirement age, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny concept. We do things a little backwards. I've been working probably for about 20 years, depending how you look at it, training and traveling, playing tournaments. And so I guess retirement, I don't know if I like using that word even, but starting the next chapter, closing one door, opening another, however you want to put it.
Well, it's not a culmination to your career, but certainly a huge honor is going to come up on November 23rd. You will become a member of the class of 2024, the South Carolina Tennis Hall of Fame. Is there any way you could express how that feels that you are going to be a Hall of Fame member?
I mean, the only thing I can say, it's the biggest honor for me growing up in Charleston, Mount Pleasant, putting all my efforts and time into being a tennis player, and then now getting the recognition, being in the Tennis Hall of Fame with some incredible names. You have Stan Smith in there, Althea Gibson. I mean, it's a very long list, and to see my name there it doesn't seem maybe real yet, but it's such an honor, and it's such a blessing. And I'm just so grateful to have had these opportunities, to play the sport that I love and to take it as far as I did. Of course, goals were still unchecked, but I think that's every athlete. And I'm just so excited to be a part of that in November.
Well, let's go back and look a little over your career, if you don't mind, because you had some great successes. I mean, not everybody who plays tennis can say that they got to the third round at Wimbledon, the quarterfinals of the French Open. What about for you yourself, though? Could you pick out a moment or two, some of the things that you would really personally consider a highlight of your career?
Yeah, I think there are definitely matches that stand out more than others. Beating Serena Williams was incredible. There was a match at US Open against Ash Barty. She was number one in the world at the time. That is just incredibly memorable as well. But also matches, I mean, some losses stand out too, where I just learned a lot or was able, I remember before I made the quarterfinals at the French Open in 2016, the week before I actually lost twice in the tournament because I got in as a lucky loser, and then, just felt like I was playing well, but not winning matches, that sort of thing. And then another one that stands out coming back from injury, actually my first match back in Charleston at that tournament, and being able to get the win there just after being unsure if I would be able to play again. And then having 6 more years after that is really special.
You mentioned injuries. It's part of the life of any professional athlete, but you had some injuries. And like you talk about, to get that extra 6 years, for someone like me who's not a professional athlete, even close, it's hard to understand the wear and tear on your body. How do you relate that to someone like me who's hasn't been in that sort of position?
I guess the best way I could describe it is if, you were going into work every day, but 2 hours before you had to go to the gym and warm up and prepare yourself before you could even go into your job and work at all. And so the time just kept extending itself, before, and practices and things like that. So it just became a lot mentally as well as physically, where I felt like the routines were just getting long, and a little bit of the enjoyment too was being taken away. And it just became more of a grind, if you will. So I felt that also I had a level of respect for myself, but also respect for the sport and just integrity to be like, okay, if I can't produce a certain level that I want or I'm asking of my body, maybe it's time to shift paths a little bit.
November 23rd is going to be a huge day in the Low Country because low country tennis legend Shelby Rogers will become the newest member. She'll be part of the 2024 Hall of Fame class for the South Carolina Tennis Hall of Fame. I'm Brian Cleary, and this is where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive. We're honored to have Shelby Rogers today with us as our guest. Now, Shelby, obviously, tennis was a labor of love for you. Have you ever considered, I mean, obviously, we'd go back a bunch of years, but if you were 12, 13, if you hadn't done tennis, what way do you think, what was your career path then?
That's such an interesting question. I think at that age, there was no other option for me. I enjoyed playing tennis. All my friends were around the tennis courts. It's the only place I wanted to be. It was my happy place, if you will. And I genuinely enjoyed just being out there as many hours as I could. Hindsight, of course, is always 2020. I've always enjoyed cooking. I've always enjoyed talking to people, learning about people. I now have my degree in psychology and just love learning about why people do the things they do. I love talking about tennis. I've done some, commentary. So I feel like there's a lot of options for me and a lot of things I really do enjoy.
What do I love about this magazine? It's about community. It's about everything that we stand for in this community that we fell in love with 14 years ago. And we love it, every piece of it. Then the beautiful pictures and then the stories. I mean, it's just fantastic. We love it. And we want to keep it strong and going. So spread the word. Spread the word.
You're listening to the Mount Pleasant Podcast.
Now, I'm not trying to weasel an invitation or whatever, but if you invited me over to your house, you say you love to cook, what's that Shelby Rogers meal? What are you going to serve that's your go-to thing?
Well, if you like seafood, I could do a nice fish. I'm in Florida right now, so we could do some scallops, a nice green. I'm always about the veggies, and then a carb. Keep it simple, protein, veggie, carb, can't go wrong.
Well, I have to follow up on the food aspect because obviously when you're a professional athlete, training is rigorous. Your diet is specific. I mean, this is kind of a Spartan life in a way. So what's the food or what is it that you couldn't do for all these years when you were in training that now you can let loose and go, you know what, I'm going for the pizza, or what is it for Shelby?
Yeah, I think for me, one of my weaknesses has always been brownies. I'm not a massive sweet tooth, but if you get and I like the middle brownie too, so I got to go for that. And then a nice stack of pancakes is always delicious. But I think I've learned over the years just about my body, and there's certain things that just don't make me feel very good. So I feel like my diet will stay pretty similar moving forward, but a nice cheat day every now and then doesn't hurt.
I'm with you on the center brownies. I don't want the crust on the outside. Give me the center brownies.
Yes, you get it.
So let me dive in a little bit because not many people have had, obviously, the experiences you have. Can you take us through what it's like to be a professional tennis player? Obviously, there's some great upsides, some downsides as well. Let's start with travel. I mean, you've traveled the world. What's one of the two or the favorite places that you've been able to experience because of your tennis career?
Yeah, I think on TV, a lot of people see the glamorous side, us in these big stadiums with fans and doing what we love for a living. But then there's the other side, like you said, where we travel, we have canceled flights, we have delays, we have logistics, the car doesn't show up, the hotel, something happens, whatever. There's always something, and we constantly talk about our travel days. But two of my favorite places, one was Costa Rica, beautiful place. Of course, we go, Paris, London, New York, these amazing cities. We go every year, and it's awesome. But I also really enjoy Melbourne, Australia. It's such a fun city. It's tough to get to. It's really far, but once you're there, it's incredible.
And when you go to a place, let's say you're out in California, so you start the tournament and not everybody obviously gets it to the finals. So everybody's not there on a Sunday, say. So if you were to go out of a tournament, maybe in the quarterfinals on a Thursday, do you stay around that town, or are you already, hey, I got to move to the next venue because the next tournament's coming up?
Yeah, usually you're out of there pretty quickly trying to get to the next event, prepare, because we pretty much have a tournament every week or every other week. And also depends on your location. So if you're, in Europe, you're a little closer than maybe some other places, or if you're on the US swing, it can be a little bit easier to travel. Maybe you can pop home for a couple days and regroup. But that's why we get so close to our teams too. And we have, we're away from our friends and family and the players and the people on tour. We start to to see more often than our family at home. And so you just have to try to surround yourself, with people that are really fun and entertaining as well, because you do have a lot of downtime sometimes. And, I always tried to do at least one day of sightseeing in any city that I was in. It's not easy because you do want to practice and rest, and sightseeing can be pretty exhausting. So you have to definitely schedule that accordingly. But I always felt like I'm not going to do this forever. I knew that, and I wanted to enjoy at least one thing in every place I went to.
Well, that was sort of what I was wondering about, because obviously if you don't have a match, you got practice every day. So it's not like you go to Melbourne and you've got a week where you can sightsee. So for you, it was just trying to squeeze and shoehorn some things in when you could.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, catch a show, a play, maybe go to a couple nice dinners, go to see, one massive site that's really popular or something that interests you. I was always excited when there would be a bookstore around, an old bookstore, something just a little bit different off the beaten path, or a nice park where you can just go walk around. But it's also tough because in tennis, you don't even know your schedule till very last minute. So a lot of other sports, you could say, okay, here's my schedule for the full season. With us, we're kind of waiting, 6 p.m. at night. Okay, what time do I play tomorrow? So it can be a little bit tricky to do things during the event, but maybe before or after, is where I would try to squeeze something in.
I wouldn't have thought about that, but yes, the more challenging that the tennis game becomes like that, because you don't know who you're playing tomorrow until you find out who won last night. We're talking with Shelby Rogers. Shelby is about to become part of the 2024 class for the South Carolina Tennis Hall of Fame. So deserved. You've heard her name around the Low Country for all her tennis play over the last decade and a half, even more. I'm Brian Cleary. Now, Shelby, we're talking about when you travel other places. So a lot of great players have come to Charleston to be a part of what is now the Credit One Open every spring. When those players would come to town, being that this is kind of, you have the home court advantage, would they ask you your suggestions about where to go, and where would you steer them if they did?
Every single year I get, a lot of text messages and questions. Where should I eat dinner? What do we do? Where do we go? As far as the dining option, I would just tell them, close your eyes and pick a spot. You honestly can't go wrong. There's so many good options in Charleston. The food scene is, like no other city in the world. So I was like, try the seafood, you got to try some collard greens, some grits, some Southern food in there. And then for things to do, I would always recommend they go to the beach, Pitt Street Bridge, just little things maybe that aren't on your first Google search. I would try to recommend. And I grew up in Mount Pleasant, so there's a few spots there that I would tell them. But the Battery's always a big hit, and the tournament's on Daniel Island, so I think the players would, maybe go a little golf and kind of explore that island too.
You mentioned how important your team was around you. A lot of people would have no idea. In tennis, we know the big names. We know Shelby, we know Serena, Venus, whoever, but we don't know who's around them. Could you share with the folks who are listening and watching today, who were some of those people that were critical in helping your success?
Yeah, it's such a unique aspect and very personal for every player. Some players travel with a lot of people, as you've seen on TV. They have maybe a nutritionist, a fitness trainer, a physio, a coach, a massage therapist. The list could get very long. For me, I liked having people I could trust. So coach was always with me. Sometimes trainer would go with me, occasionally physio. Husband would when he could, around his work schedule, and then some family members here and there, again, around their lives, because not everybody can just go city to city and follow me around. So I always genuinely appreciated when, my family or friends could make it and support me on the road. It was just a little taste of home that I could feel. But for me, a little bit smaller team is how I preferred it at the time. And obviously there's a financial aspect there as well. Depending how many employees you have, it can be a lot. So for me, I tried to keep it small and just people that have been around for a long time. My fitness trainer, I've been with almost 10 years now.
Wow.
I've been taking a few days off from him, which is kind of nice. And then my coaches, I always, I grew up having the same coach from 7 till I was 18, Brian Mitten. And then from there, I had Considering, comparing to other players, some fairly long stints with coaches. So I always like to develop those relationships.
When you were playing on a regular basis, like you have, I mean, it hasn't been that long since you stopped. So run me through, if you wouldn't mind, a quick typical day. What time were you waking up to start to maybe hit the practice courts?
Yeah, so I'm a morning person, typically could be up pretty early between 6 and 7:30. I'd like to get the day going. And funny enough, I like to practice in the morning too. And not a lot of our matches are, at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. But I trained quite a bit in Florida and it's hot. So I always did like training in the morning. And then you have a lunch break, you have fitness in the afternoon, maybe another hit, maybe not. A lot of recovery. So that's ice baths, massage, whatever modalities, compression pants, acupuncture, needling, you name it. That list got very long. So that was a lot of times, my afternoons were recovery, getting ready for the next day. A lot of hydration. Again, you mentioned the diet. I always enjoyed cooking at home. You know what's going in your food. And as much as people see, oh, she only played, a 2-hour match, or it's definitely a full-time job. And there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
Only a 2-hour match. Oh, come on.
Right.
Not many people could last that 2-hour
Right.
match as you and the other folks on tour came. So what about now? Is the alarm set for 10 in the morning now? You're just sleeping in when you can?
No, I wish I could, but honestly, like I said, I think I'm used to the morning, so I've been up pretty early as well. 8 is probably my max if I don't set an alarm. I'm up early, ready to go. It's such a beautiful time of day. And I did give myself a few days, to just relax and not set a time for the gym or do anything. And I'm a very structured person. I like routine, so it has been kind of strange, but I'm trying to enjoy it. I'm reading a lot, just trying to let the body recover before I for sure will be back in the gym very soon. That's something that's not going anywhere. It will stick around, and a lot of the things will look similar, but for now I'm just trying to enjoy it.
Ahead of her induction as part of the class of 2024 into the South Carolina Tennis Hall of Fame, Shelby Rogers is our guest today here on the Mount Pleasant Podcast, where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive. I'm Brian Cleary. Shelby, when I think of women's tennis, you can go over the years from, Margaret Court to Billie Jean King to Chris to Martina, then, Venus and Serena. Did you have opportunities to meet and deal with any of the people that maybe inspired you to start your tennis career?
Oh, absolutely. I could have, a very long list of stories right now, but I think it's so cool when you've grown up watching people play on TV or you've looked up to them, they're role models for you, and then you get to meet them and really get to know them, and they start cheering for you or giving you advice and become mentors in a way. Chris Everett's down here in Boca. She's fantastic. And she messaged me before my last match and she was excited to be commentating that one. And, I remember one of my first US Opens, I had a locker next to Kim Clijsters, who I just adored watching. And I was so nervous. I didn't know if I should talk to her or what was going to happen. And she actually came up to me first and said, "Hey, welcome. I've been watching you. You're doing so well." So it really surprised me how, I think when I first came on tour, everybody was a big family in a way, and it was more welcoming than I expected. And I fit in a little bit easier than I thought I would. And everyone was so nice. And I tried to, as I got older, pass that on and, make the new girls on tour feel welcome as well.
You mentioned your last match. Obviously, there was no way that you knew it was your last match because you were going to win and go all the way to the finals. What was the emotion before, and how is that different after what? Obviously, you'll play tennis again, but in terms of your professional career, what was that like?
I think before the match, I'd come to a point where, okay, I knew this was, my last tournament, one of my last tournaments, and I felt very okay with that decision. So I wanted to go out there and enjoy it as much as I could. I wanted to soak up every moment and be really present, try to look around, absorb the stadium and the fans and just every little detail that maybe sometimes we overlook. And during the match, I, again, tried to be very present, bring my best tennis. I'm like, this is it. You got to do what you got to do. And then after, it was just a really special moment. I've known Jessie a long time, and she had some really kind words. And then the days following, I've gotten more hugs than I have all year on site, and just really special memories and pictures being sent to me and text messages. And you name it. just the amount of people that reached out was really humbling and really special for me. So there were definitely all the emotions you could think of mixed into one, but I probably couldn't have written it a better way. Of course, I would have liked it to be later in the tournament, but it was so special to be back on Arthur Ashe Stadium, where I've had a lot of good memories. And I mean, the biggest court, the loudest court in the world, playing another very respected American and incredible talent herself. So it was pretty poetic, I guess.
As we look now to this spring for the first time in more than a decade, the Credit One Open, the WTA will come to town. You won't be playing in the tournament. Will there be any involvement? Will you be involved in the tournament at all?
I absolutely would love to be. The extent of that, we will have to wait and see. The fans will be surprised, I think. But yeah, it's an incredible event, and I want to support it as much as I can. They've done such an incredible job of growing and, you know, getting more tennis fans involved. And Charleston has always been a big supporter and a big tennis town, which has been so cool to be from there and, you know, travel the world having that backing. I felt the support always when I was on the road. And I think it's just the beginning of tennis in Charleston.
You can provide a perspective that most other people can't, but I have to ask you this. What's it like at Wimbledon to go out on that court? It just seems so historic and legendary and whatever the adjectives are, but you've been in front of that crowd. Can you describe what's that like?
It's pretty surreal. I think I would also add the adjective stiff, because there's so many rules and so many traditions.
Okay.
And in a good way, though, you know, you feel you're walking around and you just want to be so respectful of everything. There's not a flower out of place. Everything is just perfect. The colors are so vibrant. It's like the masters of tennis, you know, everything is so bright green, and then being on center court, everyone's dressed up nicely and, you know, clapping very respectfully, but they can get a little rowdy. I'm not gonna lie. Center court is super fun, and Wimbledon has such a rich history there. It's a tradition like no else. It's a very special place. If you haven't been, I would recommend it for sure. But you know, you got to be on your P's and Q's there.
That's right. The monarchy is in the house. Please be respectful with that. So for my personal thing, tennis I've played, but pickleball seems to be the thing. Do you have any thoughts on pickleball? And do you think it's a good thing for tennis that pickleball is growing?
My thoughts are, I'm happy people are being active and playing a sport. I would prefer they leave the tennis courts alone. Okay. Don't take our tennis courts away. No, I honestly haven't played. I think I've played once or twice with my little niece, you know, just hitting around a little bit. Sure. So I can't speak too much to actually playing it. But I know my doctors are seeing a lot of injuries. I would go in and they say, oh, well, the pickleball people are coming in now. So I guess if you're playing, my advice, make sure you warm up still. I know it looks easy, but you're still moving pretty aggressively. But no, I think it's a really fun social thing and people are being active, but I feel that tennis is going to always be a superior sport.
Yeah, pickleball is old dudes like me getting hurt all the time. That's exactly it. Well, so people, we ask this question of everybody who comes on the Mount Pleasant podcast, just to give people who watch and listen somewhat of a perspective on the individual. Clemson, Carolina, where do you land in that? Do you have a dog in that fight at all?
Honestly, I really don't. I know that's a horrible answer. I think just from personal experience, I might edge a little bit towards Clemson. I did, you know, my college visit procedure, and I did take a visit to Clemson. I was considering going there and playing tennis. So maybe a slight edge to them, but again, I went to neither one and my family didn't go to either one. So I'm not super passionate either way. I think it's always fun for me when South Carolina teams or sports do really well. I know that's such a lame answer, but when I'm on the road traveling and I see, you know, something big come out of South Carolina, I'm just filled with pride, and I'm so proud of whatever athletes are accomplishing there.
Well, the entire Low Country is going to take a little bit of pride because we all think in some way we had maybe a little bit to do with you now becoming the latest member, the class of 2024 South Carolina Tennis Hall of Fame. Let's go beyond that. Obviously, November 23rd is going to be a huge night for you personally, your family. What's down the road? What's the next? You're closing one door, opening up another. What's behind that door, do you think?
I've said that I want to stay involved with tennis as much as I can. I don't want to be that athlete that retires and disappears. So I'd love to stay in TV or commentating or mentoring and just, try to keep growing the game as much as I can, looking for that next generation, trying to keep growing the sport, bringing more fans and awareness to the game. I think it's such a special sport and something that has given me so much. And I just want to keep trying to continue that for others.
We look forward to seeing you maybe on the Tennis Channel, one of the ESPN channels, ABC, CBS, NBC, somewhere down the line. Shelby Rogers, November 23rd, becomes the newest member of the South Carolina Tennis Hall of Fame. Shelby, thanks so much for all your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Shelby Rogers, our guest today with me, Brian Cleary, here on the Mount Pleasant Podcast.
Thanks for spending your time with the Mount Pleasant Podcast, your community, your podcast. Listen to past and future episodes at mountpleasantpodcast.com.